Hey Del, kudos to you, my friend, for sticking up for the taxpayer. Rock on. You inspired me to tell my own little check drawing story. Check drawing is a term that I was made aware of about 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Anyway, real quickly, I have a piece of property in Kentucky. When I purchased this property, it was purchased to extract the natural resources, or to develop the natural resources from the property. Cutting my timber. When you cut your timber in Kentucky, you have to notify all the adjoining property owners, and everybody has to agree on where the property lines are. Timber is a very big deal in Kentucky. So in the process of introducing myself to all the neighbors, or all my neighbors, or my adjoining neighbors, I met a guy who is probably the single largest neighbor that I have. And he owns about 300 acres. His name, I'm just going to call him Pinhead because that's what everybody else down there calls him, and that's really what he should be called. Pinhead owns about 300 acres. So I introduced myself to Pinhead and said, hey, I told him who I was. I said, look, I'm going to be cutting my timber. I said, I'd like to get with you. I've got a surveyor coming out. I said, I'd like to get with you as far as where the property lines are. I don't want to get over on your timber, and I don't want anything that doesn't belong to me. And he said, well, he goes, I appreciate you coming to see me. And he noticed in the back of my truck was a tree stand. It was a ladder stand, in fact. He said, hey, you need help putting that up? And I said, well, yeah, if you got time. And he said, I got all kinds of time. He goes, I'll tell you what. He goes, I'll come over in about an hour. He goes, and we'll get up there, we'll put that tree stand up. He goes, you know where you want to put it? And I said, I have a pretty good idea. He goes, all right. So about an hour goes by, he comes over, he's driving a Kawasaki Brute Force 650. It's a big old 4x4, four-wheeler. And everybody around there drives those things, including myself. So I load up half of my ladder stand on my, I got a Suzuki 500 Vincent, and I load half of it on his Brute Force, and we went up the mountain. Pretty rugged trail. And about 1,400 feet above sea level, there's a flat spot, and that's where I wanted to put my tree stand. Now, to muscle those machines up the mountain is not easy. We get up to this flat spot, and he helps me put this tree stand up, which, by the way, two grown men. I mean, it was a bitch putting it up. And in the process, you know, we get the tree stand up. He says, "Hey," he goes, "do you mind if I ask how much you got for your timber?" And I said, "No, I don't mind telling you." And I told him how much it was, and he said, "Well," he goes, "Yeah, I'd kind of like to have mine cut." And I said, well, I talked to my logger and see if he wants to come over and take a look and give you a price on the boundary. And he said, well, I'd like that. He goes, would you think that he would pay me in cash, is what he said. I said, I really don't know. I said, I took a check. I said, I cannot imagine that he would pay you, because his timber was probably worth, well, a couple $100 grand. And I said, I highly doubt he'd pay you in cash. I said, but, you know, I don't want to speak for him. I said, you trying to beat Uncle Sam? And he said, well, you know, you got to do what you got to do. And he said, you know, I know. He goes, I got a check I got to protect. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, you know, I draw me a check. And I said, and I had never heard that term before in my life. I said, what do you mean you draw you a check? And he said, well, you know, I get an SSI check because I got a bad back. I had just seen this guy hump that 650 Brute Force up the side of that mountain and help me get that tree stand up, and he's getting a check from the government for a bad back. I'm like, wow. And he said, you know, in this property, my property is actually in my dad's name because, you know, I can't have anything in my name. Okay. I said, well, how much do you get a month from SSI? And I'd never even heard of SSI before. I mean, I'd heard of Social Security Disability, but never SSI, and apparently it's for people who never got enough working credits to qualify for Social Security Disability. It's a disability for people who've never earned Social Security credits or enough Social Security credits, something to that effect. So this guy, Pinhead, had never really had a job in his life. He just went straight to drawing a check for a bad back. And, you know, he's a hunter, he fishes, you know, I mean, he's a mountain man is what he is. So, anyway, and he also gets, by the way, after talking to him, he also gets a government-paid health card. So, he gets free medical, 100% paid. It's just amazing. And we were talking, and he said to me, he said, well, you know, he goes, you know, I hear tell that you're going to get your coal. And I said, well, yeah. I said, that's the plan. I said, I just had the core drillings done, and I said, I had, you know, the analysis on the coal done, and I said, the plan is to get the coal out. And he said, well, he goes, what company did you go with? And I told him the name of the company that I went with, and he said, well, he goes, I'd like to get my coal. And he said, how much coal do you think I have? I said, well, has it ever been mined? He said, no. He goes, some historical mining, but it's never really been mined. And I said, well, I know that I have 6.2 million tons of coal, and I said, and if the seams run through, and they should, I said, you're likely to have as much as I have. Now, I don't know, there could be some issues with your seams. I said, but you should have at least a couple, 2-3 million tons. And he said to me, he said, how much money do you think that's worth? And I said, well, I said, you know, bottom figure, $3.50 a ton. I said, or a percentage. I said, most likely if the price of coal is high, I said, you know, you get a percentage. I said, you could get as much as maybe $8 a ton, depends on the quality of the coal, depends on, you know, what the analysis says. I said, but chances are, you know, you'll probably get about, I said, you'll probably get about $8 a ton. And he looked at me. Now, I don't know that he did the math in his head, but I mean, it's millions of dollars. I mean, he didn't realize it, but he was a very wealthy man. And he looked at me, he says, you think that they would pay me in cash? And I was like, here's a guy that's worth millions of dollars. I mean, he doesn't know it, but he's worth millions of dollars. And he's so concerned, completely consumed with this government check that he gets, this SSI check. You know, it's amazing to me, absolutely amazing to me. But I asked him, I said, do you mind if I ask how you managed to get so much property making $650 a month? And he said to me, he said, well, I grow me a little backy. He goes, I don't mind, you know. And everybody around here knows I grow a little backy. And I said, okay. And I'd been down there long enough to know what that meant. It meant he grew marijuana. And I said, well, how much do you make a year growing marijuana? Or I said, backy. You know, they don't like the word marijuana. And he said, well, he goes, you know, the helicopters get some, which what he meant by that is the state police or the National Guard. He goes, and the ginsengers get some, and that's basically rogues running through the mountains. They're digging up ginseng root, but they're also looking for their backy to steal. He said, but I usually make about 50 grand a year. I said, you make 50 grand a year tax-free plus $650 a month from SSI, and you get your medical paid for. He said, yeah. I said, that's amazing to me. Now, I wanted to grab him by the neck, but I really needed to get along with him because I didn't want to have any border disputes. But it's just amazing to me what goes on in this world. And I could tell you a million stories about people down there that draw checks that it's just amazing to me. Absolutely amazing to me. And they draw these checks for a ton of different reasons. If they can't read or write, they get a check. If they're addicted to drugs, they get a check. If they're bad back or crazy or whatever, there's a million reasons why they get checks, but it's basically just a huge welfare program down there. And it's sad because it affects them and their children. For example, I know people who will not send their children to school to get educated because they know that if they keep their children stupid, then they're going to get a check when they become adults. Most people, the best thing that you feel that you could do for your kid is to get them educated, send them to college so they can make something of themselves. Down there, it's not like that. It's almost, well, it's the exact opposite for a lot of people. You know, not everybody, but there's a lot of people down there that's like that. And it's just generation after generation after generation, which is just really sad. So anyway, I could tell a million stories, but Del, you inspired me to tell this one. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and hopefully everybody enjoyed it. Everybody take care.